In this lesson, we'll begin modeling the various subcomponents of our bookcase. Alright, so let's get to modeling here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my model, and I'm going to move this guy out of the way just a little bit, just so he's not as distracting. Just grab this whole thing. I don't think he's added as part of the component there. So we'll move that out. So basically, when we begin modeling our dynamic components, I'm going to model it. You can either model it in a separate space, but we're going to model it in the middle of our project here. But once you start adding parameters such as positioning and sizing and things like that, a lot of that stuff's actually going to be referenced off of your origin. So it's always wise to kind of build off of this. That way you don't have to do any extra thinking or math to try to figure out offsets and things like that. That'll kind of make a little bit more sense as we begin modeling here. So the first thing I want to discuss is our material, because our material is, each subcomponent is going to be made of the same material. And we're going to have two different sizes essentially. One size will be the bottom, the two sides, the top, and the shelf, but the back piece will have a much smaller size. So for the back piece, it's going to be a 1/4 inch thick. So we'll keep that in mind a little bit later. So we'll start off on the bottom, and that's going to be 3/4 of an inch thick. And that'll be the same for the sides, the shelf, and the top piece. But I also want to think about positioning. So if we're starting our model off here at the origin, we're going to want our side here to actually be right at the origin. So as we build our piece, our bottom piece, that's actually going to need to be offset in just a little bit. And it'll need to be offset by the thickness of our material, all right? All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. From the origin, I'm going to build my first form with my first option. So if I look to the bottom right, I can see my dimensions in place here. I see my longest dimension is going to be my first number. So I want that number to be my first size. It'll be 5 feet. I'm going to do comma, 1 foot. Hit enter, and it'll build the bottom piece. Now, one thing we didn't do is we didn't take into account the actual thickness of the back portion. So if I'm looking at this now, right now we have a front. We have our two sides, and this will be the back. And then the top is obviously going to be on top. So keep that in mind as far as orientation is concerned, because we're going to be labeling things that way as well. So what I want to do really quick is go ahead and make an adjustment. Well, we don't really need to, we won't take into account that extra 1/4 inch for the back piece. We're mainly going to be concerned with the overall thickness for this. So again, our measurements here, 5 feet wide, 12 inches deep. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and turn this into a component. And I can do so when it's a 2D surface simply by double clicking it. And what it'll do is it'll highlight my surface and all my edges. Now right click it, say make component. And now what we want to call this one, and you want to be very specific about how we name this, because once we start working with variables and formulas, they're going to be referencing these names. So be sure to do it the exact same way I do it. So I'm going to start this off with a capital. We're just going to say bottom. And if I wanted to, I can put a description in here talking about more information on the bottom, but I'm okay with what we have so far. So what we're doing is we're making a component, basically a subcomponent, and we're going to call it bottom. Hit create and click out of the way. So now if you click back on this element, if everything highlights, we're in good shape. That's one component. If the edges and the face and everything highlights. So now I can double click on this component, and now all I need to do is give it a thickness. And again, that thickness is going to be based on our 3/4 of an inch. So go ahead and pull that and go 0.75 for 3/4 of an inch, and it will give us our 3/4 of an inch. Easy stuff, right? So if I click away, I can see I just click on it one time. Oops, got a loss there. I can click on it one time, and everything is highlighted. So I know I'm in good shape. So we're not really done yet. Let's apply some real basic predefined attributes. So go ahead and right click on it. Remember that area I showed you earlier? Here, I'll adjust my placement here just a little bit for you, so you can see that window. So go to Dynamic Components, go to Attributes, and now, you remember that component we created, bottom? Here it is right here. And it'll remain and look like the main component until we begin adding subcomponents, or until we group this individual piece with other pieces, and then we'll create another component. So right now it just looks like the main. So let's go ahead and add a couple of components, or attributes, excuse me. So the first one is we want to control, one, the positioning, but we also want to control the size of this bookcase, right? That's the main goal of this, is to have a flexible bookcase. So go ahead and click on Add Attribute, And again, the ones that appear here, these are all our predefined attributes. And if you want to do custom, which we'll do a little bit later, we'll go ahead and add them down here. So let's go ahead with positioning. So if you want to add individual positioning, you can. But in my case, I'm going to go ahead and click on this title. It's going to say add all, and it should bring all those elements up, like so. Easy as that, right? So we're going to do one more. We'll do size for right now. So click on add attribute, go to size, add all, and there we go. So what does this mean? So if I kind of zoom out a little bit, and I click on my element, you'll notice something. Each one of these has a color assigned to it. So if I think about my positioning, so red X means X on my X line or my X coordinate. So going left and right. On the Y, which is in the Y coordinate, or the Y axis, I should say. And then the X axis. So the Y, green, color-coded nicely, we know that anything we do, it's going to move along this way. Same thing with the blue. It's going to be moving along the Z axis, the blue. And again, color-coded nicely so we could see it. So that kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of my positioning. And then the same thing for your size. Red, blue, and green applied to red, blue, and green axes that we're looking at here. Now we're not really going to add anything in here just yet, but I do want to go ahead and make one quick move. I want to grab this and I want to scoot this over along my x-axis by the thickness of our material. Remember, we want our side to be located right at that origin. So go ahead and type in 0.75 after you grab that corner to move it. And when I do that, you'll notice immediately our X positioning changed to 0.75. So let's come down here and look at what we did. So we created our bottom piece. Oops. There we go. We created our bottom piece. And then we offset it at the origin, and it showed up in our attributes. So you could see how that works. And so you get a really good feel for how this is going to behave, and then basically what we're going to do from here on out. So there's our bottom piece. You created your first subcomponent of our overall component. So in the next lesson, we're going to jump to our next piece, which will actually be our left side, and we'll also add some more predefined attributes to it as well. So I'll meet you in the next lesson.